If you want to get clarity on that second step in the strategy crafting process, the setting of objectives, and if you want to know the difference between objectives and goals, stick around and watch this video. Hi everyone, my name is Jacques Snyman and I make videos to help you create a more secure future for you and your family through some form of a side hustle which is consciousness or purpose-based. I want to get into the content tonight of objective setting. I went down the rabbit hole, so a warning here for you. Don't try and clarify this stuff. I'm gonna explain the difference between goals and objectives very clearly for you, so you don't have to spend the time. I must admit, I spent hours trying to figure out the difference between these two. So in essence, goals supersede objectives, right? So goals are more almost statements of intent. They are definitely not tasks. They are more conceptual. They tend to be longer term in terms of their timeline reference as well. They motivate us in terms of, for example, achieving a vision or a mission. So in a business perspective, that's how they linked. They are a statement of a desired outcome. An example would be something like, we want to improve customer service. That's a goal, right? It indicates intentions from our side. It also gives direction and it gives something for us to aspire towards, but it's typically intangible and difficult, if not impossible, to measure. Those are goals, right? So goals are supported or given effect to by means of objectives. So if you think of a hierarchy, we spoke about the vision and the mission. So it will be vision and then mission and then goals and then objectives. So the objectives support the goals. If you have one goal, you could have a number of objectives supporting that goal. Objective 1, 2, and 3. Right? So objectives are in support of goals. They typically have a shorter timeline. If goals have a timeline of somewhere between, let's say, 2 or 3 to 5 years, then objectives have a timeline that is typically less than a year. Objectives are also a description of activities, actions, and specific things that we can go and do in support of achieving a goal. So the example I gave in terms of improving customer service as a goal would be supported by an objective that is something like reduce the customer waiting time to below 5 minutes or below 2 minutes, whatever is relevant for your business. So it's a very short-term, tangible, measurable, almost set of actions. That's the objective part, right? So the difference between goals and objectives should be clear. Goals are longer term, they are more conceptual, they are typically not easily measured, but objectives clearly are. Both of them, goals and objectives, should follow the age-old recipe of the SMART goals. So they should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be achievable, they should be realistic, and they should be time-bound, all of those, right? So that's the difference between goals and objectives. Do you need the one or the other? You need both, guys. So you have a vision, a mission, a goal, and then objectives supporting that specific goal. I'm going to give you an example just of life goals. In other words, setting objectives and goals for your life as opposed to just for your business. Now here we go back again to the basics. What areas of life do you have to set objectives and goals for? If you go back to my earlier definition of what our human needs are, I said that Stephen Covey describes it at the hand of a statement that he's got. He says you need to live, you need to love, you need to learn, and you need to leave a legacy. Those are the 4 human needs, or categories of human needs if you want. The living part's all the physical stuff, right? The loving part's all the relational stuff. The learning part has got to do with your mindset and your growth, if you want, your learning, right? And then the legacy part is the last aspect, and that's the spiritual part. So you can go and say, right, I cut my life up into 4 aspects: the physical parts, the relational parts, the emotional and mental, if you want, the growth parts, the learning parts, and then lastly the spiritual part. So that's one way of doing it. So define your life in terms of those 4 categories, and then write down for yourself goals and objectives supporting those goals. Another way of looking at it, 7 aspects of goals. I found 2 other authors who define 7 levels, if you want, or 7 categories of goals. Tony Robbins calls it the pyramid of mastery. He starts at the bottom with the physical aspect of your life. He then moves on to the emotional part, which has got to do with your values and your beliefs and the meaning that you attach to that. That's the second category. The third one would be relationships. The fourth one he refers to is time. The fifth one is career. The sixth one is finances. And the seventh one, again, is spiritual or contribution goals and objectives. So there's the 7 categories, if you like, the slightly finer, almost granularity of defining aspects of your life. Dave Ramsey uses a similar approach. He starts with social aspects. He then moves on to a second category called family. He says that the third category is health and fitness. The fourth aspect that he touches on is mindset and learning, or intellect. The fifth one is career, and yeah, he's the same as Tony Robbins. The sixth one is financial, and the seventh one is spiritual. So there's 2 or 3 ways in which you can approach your goal and objective setting as part of the second step of this strategy or plan crafting process that we are busy with. What I would also like to suggest is take those 7 categories and just define 2 things for yourself. Determine where you are, what is the current reality, if you want, in terms of, for example, your career, your finances, your relationships, or your health. And then give it another shot and say, right, if I currently believe that, for example, my finances sit at a 4 out of 10, for example, I'd like that to be at around an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Clearly, there's then a gap of about 5 points on a 10-point scale. Do the same for all 7 categories. In other words, there's 2 numbers that you're interested in. The one is the current reality, and the second one is the aspiration. If you plot those things on a little wheel, on a little cartwheel, if you want, with the 4 or 7 aspects on those wheels, and you've got a current reality and you've got an aspiration or an objective, then that forms your wheel of life. What that gives you is, at one glance, you can see where you are, and you can clearly see where the biggest gaps are. Now that helps us in terms of setting those objectives and starting with an action plan. Where should I focus, right? Should I be focusing on relationships because they're really not going well and I'd love to work on them? Should I be focusing on health because my health is not good and I really need to focus on that? Or should I be, for example, focusing on career or finances, or whichever aspect happens to have the biggest gap? So I also created a little tool. So if you're interested, drop me a mail again, like or subscribe if this makes sense for you. I hope this gives you at least some framework in terms of doing that second step. Today I only focused on the life goals and objectives. Tomorrow, or in the next session, I will chat to you about how do you take that same concept and then start developing goals and objectives for the business aspect or the side hustle that we're busy developing as well. So like, subscribe, send me an email if this interests you. Stick around and look out for the future videos.